the overlay of the individual. There, each of us is unique in our personality, and so how these things show up for me will look different than how they show up for you. Then they will look different from show up for Susie or John, right? And the other piece is that oftentimes there's these intersecting kind of cultural overlays, cultural or societal overlays, right? Oftentimes, and especially we talk about depression in Black folks and Black women, this idea of laying in bed all day under the covers and locked away is not the quintessential picture of what that looks like. Lots of women get up every day, go to work, do the thing, take care of kids, and are depressed, right? They have struggled through, and they struggle through day in and day out. And you may never see that armor crack.
But let's just also say
it doesn't invalidate their experience.
I mean, since we are doopy deep, let's just be real. I deal with depression every single day, and I'm doing a podcast with you right now.
Fabulous.
So this is depression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is the point I need people to really, really get. Like, there are days when I can't get out of bed. And on those days, I keep my Netflix, Hulu, and my Amazon Prime subscription real high. Right.
And what I also want to offer is there are some folks for which that just can't be true.
Exactly.
Right. And so, and then also I want to recognize like all of these things show up in different levels of intensity for folks, right? So if we want to talk specifically about diagnosable disorders, even when you diagnose someone with major depressive disorder, you talk about it being mild, moderate, or severe, right? And so there may be times for folks in which all consequences be damned, they're not getting out of bed, right? All consequences be damned, they are not going to take a shower every day, right? Because the depression has reached that state or gets to that state. And then there are lots of folks for whom they power through, where because the consequences of not powering through, and what I mean by that is getting up every day to do the functions of life, right?
The rent is not going to pay itself.
Hello.
So
the rent's not going to pay itself. The kids are not going to feed themselves. Right. Nobody's going to do the laundry, right? You have to, you have things that you have to do. But what I'm saying is I want us to be able to try to work to create a little bit more capacity in ourselves to think about how is the person showing up in doing those things.
Right.
And that's what I think makes the difference.
And I also think it's important for us to go back to something you said earlier about Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade and how they had everything. And I just don't understand, blah, 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 blah. One of the things we tend to do in this world is judge a person based on their means.
Mm-hmm.
If you are
That's
of
classism
a certain
101.
Right. If you are of a certain socioeconomic status, you should not deal with A, B, and C. Now, I'll tell you, part of it is our own fault, because specifically here in America, the land of the free and the home of the brave, people are sold a bill of goods that states if you work hard, save your money, build your fortune, you will avoid the trappings of poverty, mediocrity, and all of that.
Hashtag lies.
There's this misconception.
Wait, hashtag true American lies.
Right.
Let's call it that. Hashtag true American lies.
Absolutely. The misconception is, which when you think about it, it's perverse. If I'm rich, I don't have mental health issues. I don't have health issues. I don't have any issues.
Mm-hmm.
What I know to be true is that cancer does not care how much money you make.
No.
Depression does not care how much money you make. Diabetes does not care how much money you make. Lest we forget, kings and queens in European countries routinely got gout because they overindulged in food and drink.
I just heard the other day that there's some research to support that women, regardless of their socioeconomic status, if women cook in the house more, there's better health outcomes for them in terms of how diet affects your health outcomes. So this idea around like having money making you better or healthier, it's not necessarily supported. It's about the choices you make and the activities that you do and how you structure your life, regardless of your social class. Now, we also want to recognize that certain people in certain social classes have greater access to a wider variety of ways to structure their life than folks who don't, right? But that we can't necessarily say one equals the other. And especially when it comes to mental health issues, I think what happens is the overlay of oppression or all the isms is that the way we talk about what depression looks like among certain folks, and the way we talk about mental health, and what it looks like among certain groups gets criminalized, stigmatized, seen in a negative light, allows us to do victim blaming versus other groups. But the bottom line is depression is depression is depression.
I know that's right.
The end. So I wanted to just give a little bit, few facts about suicide. I don't know do we want to have the package played now?
I was just going to say, we're going to take a moment and we'll be right back with those facts.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Nikki Coleman, for allowing me to just give this brief message to your audience. I am Dr. Megan Houston, the author of the workbook, Treating Suicidal Clients and Self-Harm Behavior, Assessments, Worksheets, and Guides for Interventions in Long-Term Care. If I could give 1 ounce of advice or relay a message to you guys about suicide, it would be to do not underestimate the insidious nature of suicide. No one, not any one of us, is immune or impervious to the factors that lead to the choice to complete suicide or attempt suicide. Don't underestimate how many people in your space that might be in pain, that may feel lonely, helpless, or hopeless. Don't be fooled by smiles and gestures of goodwill, because you never know what's happening for somebody. Please stay aware. We have to ask the questions. We have to check on people who we think are strong. We have to check on people that we view as being frail. We have to know what to ask about and how to ask these questions. We really do. Do not be afraid to broach this topic. Do not be afraid to just say, hey, how are you doing today? What's going on? I've noticed that you're lonely. I've noticed that you haven't been yourself. I know that something's different. Hey, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? We have to ask these questions. And I urge you, again, to remain aware and know what's happening for your loved ones, for your friends, for your family members, for your clients, just anybody that's in your space. Just know what's happening with them. Don't ever underestimate.
Okay, we are right back. That was Dr. Megan in Houston. She's actually, her book, Treating Suicidal Clients and Self-Harm Behaviors, Assessments, Worksheets, and Guides for Interventions in Long-Term Care by Dr. Megan in Houston. That's available on Amazon. There's also a link in our description for that as well. And we're back with Dr. Nikki.
Hey, so, I am very fortunate to live here in Houston, which is a large urban community. And there's also lots of mental health professionals that are really at the top of their game, doing wonderful things that I happen to be friends with and that I happen to know personally. And Dr. Megan Houston is one of them. And her her work on suicidality and self-harm is really worth picking up, especially if you're a mental health I can't get the words out. Mental health clinician out there, or a student. I really think her book is worth an investment of your funds. When I have someone in my life that I'm concerned about, or and making sure that I'm still staying on top of like what the research says. As a professional with clients, like Megan is my go-to person. And there's another researcher too, whose work around Black folks in depression and Black folks in suicidality, Dr. Rita Walker, also here at the University of Houston. They are really at the forefront in both of their, on the Megan on the practitioner side, and Dr. Rita Walker on the research side are kind of at the forefront of leading the conversation around this. And I think that's really important. Suicide is way more prevalent than I think we would like to all kind of talk about. So in 2016, suicide was the 10th leading cause of death in the U.S. And related to some of the other conversations we've had here before, what do you think, Tomas, is the number one approach or mechanism that people use to commit suicide?
That's a good question. I would say prescription medication.
Nope. Firearms. There's some strong correlational research that shows that when you reduce access to firearms, you reduce risk of suicidality. So this is part of the reason why we see what we tend to see in trends over time across racial groups is that men are less likely to attempt suicide, but more successful in doing so. And women are more likely to attempt suicide, but are less successful in doing so. So said differently, less men try it, but when they do, they are more successful because more often than not, men use firearms to do so. And women try it more, but are less successful because they don't use methods such as firearms. They tend to use other methods like asphyxiation and access to prescription pills, et cetera, et cetera. I think another myth is that at least I will speak specifically about like Black communities. I think there's a myth that Black people don't commit suicide, that that's a thing we don't do. And that's not true at all. So in 2016, the rate of suicide for Black people was 6.1. So this would be 6.1 people out, and this is statistics. I know there's not a 0.1 of a person, right? We're talking about statistics. So roughly 6 people out of 100,000. But then when we look across sex differences, we see Black men were at a rate of 10.2 and Black women were at a rate of 2.4. The sad part about it, and one of the things what I took away from what Dr. Mikanisha was talking about, is like suicide, it doesn't discriminate, right? And what we were talking about before, depression doesn't discriminate. I think also a lot of times, and I've heard people that I know say things like, why would a young person do that, right? Why would someone, a teenager or a child, commit suicide? Like that has to be a really, really like that can't happen very often. And the reality is it does happen as well. And when we look at rates of suicide for Black youth between the ages of 10 and 19, last year the rate was 3.7 out of 100,000. And we see men outpacing females even in the youth category. And in fact, I've seen some statistics that say young Black boys are the fastest increasing number of folks that are committing suicide. I think there's some other groups that are also at risk, and there's been some consistent research over time to show that LGBTQ youth have reportedly higher rates of suicidal thoughts and attempts than their non-queer peers, right? So I point all that to say, yes, we always want to look at the individual. Yes, we want to take who a person is, their circumstances into account. We want to recognize that these depression and risk of suicide doesn't discriminate, but we also want to recognize that certain people may be at a higher risk or more vulnerable. That might be a better way to say it. Certain people may be at